back in the previous verse and say ye, Y-E. We don't say ye, we say you. And other things are different. So here's a modern translation of these same verses that I like. It's called the Message translation. Elliot, would you go back to verse 28? This is a recent translation in contemporary speech. Now, listen to the way this is translated. The translator of this is a man named Eugene H. Peterson, and he was a minister for most of his life, and he found out that he spent most of his time explaining what things meant, explaining what the words meant. So he thought, I'm just going to make a translation that reflects, and really it's more of a, if you want to call it a paraphrase, but really there's two ways to translate. If you let me take a little side diversion for a moment. Sometimes people find fault with the Message translation because it's so different than the King James. But listen to this. There are two ways you can translate. One way is to go word by word. The other way is to look at a passage and try to capture the thought and go thought by thought. And both of them are fine. I think they're both good. King James is word by word. But what Eugene H. Peterson has tried to do in the Message is take the thought and translate thought by thought. So he tries to capture the thought of what Jesus is conveying as best he can understand it and give us the thought in ordinary speech. Now listen to this. Imagine Jesus saying this. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Boy, this does sound like a commercial now, doesn't it? And when I first read that, I thought to myself, you know, tired, worn out, burned out on religion? You know what? Actually, I am kind of. I kind of am. Because what I consider religion is like those lists of things you're supposed to do and things you're not supposed to do. The Christian life is far more organic than that. It's more natural than that. It's not something artificial, like you're trying to fit into some kind of a role that you're not cut out for. He's just saying in an intimate kind of personal way, come to me. Is that what he says? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. Now, isn't that a beautiful thought? He doesn't say, I'm going to take away your life. He says, you'll recover your life. You know, what this reminds me of is there are a lot of things as we go through life, there are a lot of things that happen to us that have the effect of damaging us and injuring us in many different kinds of ways. I like to read. I don't know about you. Nowadays it seems like fewer and fewer people like to read, but I actually like to read. And I have wide-ranging interests. I read lots of things. Anything that captures my interest, I will read it. And I like to read psychology. And I find a lot of interesting thoughts there. And I remember reading a book about a psychologist named Carl Jung, J-U-N-G is the way his name is spelled. And then those who kind of followed his method of dealing with psychology. And I read a phrase that I liked. One of these Jungian psychologists said, what I see myself as doing with people is helping them to recover their lives. And what he was saying is there are a lot of things that happen in life that injure us and wound us and hurt us in various ways, that cripple us in some ways in our lives. And I think this is what Jesus is actually saying here. Come to me. When he said in the King James translation, you'll find rest for your souls, this is what Eugene H. Peterson says, you'll recover your life. Now, not only does he not want to give you some artificial, phony, baloney religious life that's not real and make you try to fit into some role that's not really true or not real to you, he wants to help you recover your life. Now, when I was talking to you a while ago about him wanting to infiltrate and be a part of your life, carry your burdens for you, that's what it means. You will recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Now, I don't know about you. This sounds very appealing to me. Does it not? Let's go and read it. Listen to this. Now, this is a beautiful phrase. Walk with me. Think about that. I was talking to you a while ago about a metaphor for our lives as we walk, our walk through life. And here he uses this. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. See, this gets back to that idea I presented to you before about when you yoke the two animals together and one walks along with the other one. The one that knows how to do it, he's pulling all the weight, and the other one's just walking along with him. See, that's what Jesus is like. He knows how to do it. He knows how to do it in your life. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Listen to this. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. To me, that's very appealing because that says it's not an artificial, phony thing. It's natural. It's unforced. You don't have to force it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. That's good news too. Nothing awkward or unnatural. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting. You know, if I had to come in here every week and put on some kind of an act and stand up here and put on a religious voice and act in some way that's not me, I'd I was about to say, I'd just soon shoot myself. That sounds bad. I would just give up. I wouldn't want to do it. I couldn't face it, But see, I don't think Jesus thinks the Christian life is awkward or ill-fitting. I think he thinks it's natural, and that's the way he's presenting it to us. He wants it to be natural to us. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Look at the next verse. Keep company with me, and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. Now, isn't that appealing? Free and light. Natural, not awkward, not phony. And go back to the previous verse just for a second, Elliot. I think the key thought here is walk with me. See, in our life, we walk through life. And what Jesus is saying here is walk with me in your life. Now, here's the challenging part. Jesus is not around here physically anymore. 2,000 years ago, he came into the world and he taught and he did all kinds of different things, and people could go to him physically. But see, he has now been crucified and raised from the dead. He died on the cross to pay for our sins, to make us right with God. The Bible tells us he is now at the right hand of God. That means in a position of acceptance and authority. And it says he's there for us, interceding as an advocate for us. So if we're reading about this and he says, "Come to me, walk with me," how do you come to somebody that you can't see physically? How do you come to somebody that you can't go to physically? Like if I said to you, come to my house, well, you could just come down here to my house and knock on the door. But you can't do that. That's my sound effect. That's knocking on the door. But you can't do that with Jesus because he's invisible. How do you walk with somebody that's invisible? How do you come to somebody that's invisible? Well, the only way I know to do it is by believing or by faith. And interestingly, that's exactly what we have. I'd like to read one other passage now in Hebrews chapter 11. The author in chapter 11, the author of the book of Hebrews, talks about faith. And in a very interesting way, I think this will answer the question for us. Verse 1. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. This author, and I say this author because we don't know the name. We don't know for sure who wrote this because he doesn't give it to us. There's a lot of speculation. Some say Paul the Apostle. Others say other names. We don't know. So I'm just going to say the author. In chapter 11, verse 1, he says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So we're talking by faith we apprehend or contact, or faith is necessary when we're talking about things that are not seen. And we're today talking about Jesus, how he's not seen. And how do you come to Jesus and walk with him? Well, it's by faith, by believing, by trusting. There's an interesting verse. If you skip for a moment to verse 6, I want to read this. Verse 6 says this, "But without faith it is impossible to please him." And the him he's talking about is God. "Without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is." That makes sense, doesn't it? And we could apply the same thing. We're talking about Jesus. I think it's okay to interchange. We can say God and Jesus. They're on the same side. They're on the same team. Jesus came and represented God. He's our representative. The same thing is true. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is. In other words, you wouldn't come to God not believing that he is. Now, the reason he's saying this is because God is invisible. You don't see it. But in order to come to him, it's by faith. So he says, without faith it's impossible to please him. He that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is the rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now what that says to me is, not only, he says, you have to believe that he is, but you will get what you came for. You won't go away empty-handed. Now, when he says without faith it's impossible to please him, I think that's a remarkable statement. Because again, comparing this to our religious misconceptions, we think that a lot of things would go in there rather than faith. Well, what most people would say, without a perfect, pristine, pure, holy life, it's impossible to please him. The only problem with that is, that may be the idea that we get in church, but listen, in our ordinary lives, that's not necessarily the case. And as hard as we try, and as much as we have a motive to do it, we make mistakes and do things wrong. Well, he knows that. So he says, he doesn't say that it's something that you have to perform or you have to do in order to please God. What he's looking for is faith or trust or reliance, as those are other words. Now, rather than just stand here now and talk about what my idea is about what it means about this, coming to God, believing that He is. This verse